Welcome to the video review of Generation's Fall of Cybertron, Bruticus. As Bruticus' full combined form seems to kind of be the main event, I'm going to start with that. I'm pretty sure that's why you're watching anyway. It took me a minute for me to realize that I actually am really happy to have this figure, but there are some really bad points. So if you are wanting to get this figure, if you're dead set on getting it, listen to what I have to say so that when you get it, you aren't as disappointed as I am. First of all, there's the obvious visual aspect. Definitely not his game version, but what are you going to do? I don't know if I'm the only person that thinks that combiners should be big, bulking, hulking masses of destructive power, but this guy doesn't really invoke that. He looks cool and powerful, especially next to some of the smaller class figures, but when you put him up next to a leader class guy, he kind of loses some of that. Then there's the whole color aspect, because seriously, he's missing like 2 colors and he's a freaking rainbow. But the thing that really brings this figure down more than anything is the quality on this thing. Size and quality have really been dwindling lately, but when it comes down to a figure that needs to combine and should be something really impressive, quality seems to be that much more important. And this guy, kind of skirts that. Despite his colors making him look a bit like a Power Rangers Megazord, he's a really well-executed combining figure, and I think the colors are starting to grow on me, even though he has nothing in common with the colors of his G1 counterpart, which is kind of unfortunate. At least this one has no parts forming. The quality does more than hamper the ability to combine this thing and the general feel of the toy. It also really hurts this thing's posability. A lot of the joints are really tight, especially on the arms, but what brings it down is the legs. You go to pose an arm forward... Oh, and now it won't do it. Well, I did have it posed earlier trying to put the arm forward, and the whole thing just fell forward. I don't know why it's not doing it now. The knee joints are fine, it's the hip joints, or should I say, lack thereof. You can get his hips to move, but you have to unpeg them from the combined form, and when you do, the hips are really loose, and you really have no chance of them holding a pose. When you get this thing, you have to accept the fact that it's a statue. At least he's got some pretty decent waist swivel up here. You can get a little bit of backwards leg movement with Onslaught's hip joints, but it's not that great, and you can barely get it to go forward with this crotch piece in the way. Unlike some previous combiners where they were fairly posable, this one... Well, it's got the jointage, it doesn't have the support, and that really comes down to the quality issue once again. Please stop me if I complain about the quality on this thing too much, because it really is an issue. This thing likes to fall apart a lot. All joints pop off like crazy on this guy. They're a bit scary to get back in. Combining the pieces is a bit of a nightmare. Sometimes when you're putting the pieces on, that happens, and that's horrifying. And it's not like you can avoid applying that much pressure. You need it to get these combiner stumps together. I don't have him in the proper combined form because I like Vortex here better as a foot and Swindle better as an arm. And you can go all sorts of crazy with his arms, especially if you're bringing Onslaughts from down here. Just imagine if this thing had lightsabers. For me, a combiner is just a big mass of robots and limbs, so it kind of makes sense to me that he would just sort of be an amorphous mass of limbs and body parts. Kind of like a land-based robot squid. You can't really do this with the other 2 arms. I mean, you can, but it doesn't look as good as this, if this looks good. As combiners tend to have, he has a combined form of all their weapons, which is sort of however you want to put them, since they're fairly versatile. I don't add Onslaughts in there because it really just needs to be on the back of Bruticus, but that's my version of his super mega death, Cybertronian death, ray death. Because all of his hands are 5mm ports, he can't hold World's Smallest Shockwave. But I do intend to modify him at some point to be able to hold this hand that came with World's Smallest Shockwave. He will hold it. I promise you that. While this thing has a lot of good sculpting, the head has got to be one of the best points on it. Looks like he's sticking a big purple tongue out. Cannot unsee. Being that there's not much you can do with this mode, it's still a pretty cool figure, and I don't know if it's completely worth the hype that's been surrounding this thing, but I definitely like it. I'm pretty happy to have it. The quality could definitely be improved, because I'm not gonna lie, this thing kind of feels like a knockoff. Most of the pieces that go into this just don't feel very good, but all in all, I like it. As far as combiners go, this is probably one of the better ones, not counting the quality. Here he is with Revenge of the Fallen Leader Class Megatron, and as you can see, he's still a little bit taller, but he lacks some of the mass. I think that effectively this is the first Leader Class Generations figure. It doesn't really have any gimmicks other than combining, of course, but no electronics, no lights, which really isn't a big deal to me, but I just don't know if this is worth the price of a Leader Class figure, and it definitely costs you a lot more than that. Bottom line, this is very much the main event. If you can't find a reason to get this figure, I don't see a reason to get the other Combaticons. I don't know if that's obvious or not. You're buying a Leader Class figure. Are you going to be happy with this? Especially with its bad quality. And now on to the individual limbs. This is Vortex in his foot mode, and he actually makes a pretty decent foot. I wasn't sure what limb I was going to make him, but I was pretty positive that it was going to be a foot, and That's definitely the way of things. I really like the X on the shin there. It's a pretty good foot that obviously is a helicopter. And speaking of, it's an okay little Cybertronian helicopter. Very obviously missing the back rotor. So I'm not really sure how this thing would steer. Looks like a mechanical fish anteater of sorts. When I saw that this was what was going to be released in stores for those of us who couldn't afford the San Diego Comic-Con exclusive Bruticus, I was like, oh, those colors. Red and purple? When I get it in hand, it's not so bad. I definitely like this better than I thought I was going to, and liked it more than some of the other figures that I thought I was going to like more and didn't like as much. One of the problems with this, the rotor doesn't spin very well, but being that I like it as that X shin guard thing in his robot mode, I don't mind so much. This does turn into an arm, but I'm not going to show it to you because it looks like crap, and I'm not even sure if I did it right because I was impatient, and it really isn't worth looking at. Just turn it into a leg. It's just the leg. However, if you do turn it into the arm mode, it has two interchangeable hands, one being the gun and one being this hand, with an articulated thumb so it can be left or right hand. The robot mode's alright. It's kind of got that tiger hawk razor claw look to it. A little bit tribal maybe a samurai. Kibble's not too bad. I mean, no more than any other figures, but it's still Kibble. Much like the rest of his Combaticon brothers, including Bruticus, he doesn't have any wrist articulation, so that sucks. It's not too bad until you get to the arms, and you have to transform them in such a weird way, and the elbows jut backwards like that. They just are crap, and when it comes down to the bladed arm, you have to turn it like upside down weird ways to get it to not cut his face off when he's using it, and when you do that, he has no real elbow joint edge. It's just, these arms are just terrible. They got these huge flaps, and they suck. The figure's okay. I mean, he stands well with his enormously deep legs, but yeah, I don't know. This was the one I wanted the least, at least based on its images, and while it's better than what I expected, it's still not great, especially considering you can see his hands inside of his legs. I guess that's not too bad considering this guy's effectively a 5-changer. 6-changer. On top of the blades he already has on him, he also comes with 2 of these blades. Did they have bladed him up enough? He's got like 6 blades. I don't know, does this count as a gun? He can hold it like a gun. It's got a port for that, but... Vortex. Here's Brawl in his leg mode, and again, this is one of my favorite 2 legs out of the team, so he ended up staying as a leg. It's not a very far cry from his tank mode, which is essentially this. And is that a tank? I don't know. Brawl always has turned into a tank, so I assume this is a tank. It's got a turret on top, like a tank. So, it's kind of a tank. But I've never seen a tank with its treads on sideways, so I don't know what's up with that. It's also got thrusters on the back. Hover tank? I don't know. I'm not really sure what they were going for here. I think maybe they were kind of shooting for Revenge of the Fallen Megatron, but missed the mark horribly and kind of turned it into a strange Cybertronian tuning fork. The alt mode isn't terribly convincing, but at least you don't see too much of the robot parts except for the back of his head there. And you can take his gun and stick it between the twin barrels and make him a 3-barrel tank, I guess. So, yeah. Tank. Brawl also can turn into an arm, but when you get him into arm mode, you quickly realize that he has no elbow joint. So there was absolutely no chance of him being an arm for me. And I really like him as a leg, so that just worked out. I wasn't so sure about Brawl in these 90s neon Constructicon green colors, but once I saw him in person, I actually came to like it. I think he looks really good. It's actually one of my favorite looking robots out of the bunch. It's not great, and it's got crappy arms like most of them, but it's pretty good. His toes suck, and that really hampers posability. He's got really nasty kibble back here. They didn't really try to get rid of this at all, and since it really doesn't add anything to any of the modes, I don't even really know why it's there. I probably could cut it off and wouldn't mind, but I really don't want to do that. He's not a hard one, but his arms are real difficult trying to get him out of and into position for the tank. You can kind of fix the back kibble if you pull the gun up here and then fold that up, but then his guns are sticking up super high. While almost all of these guys' arms suck, his seem to be the worst with these huge voids and these tiny little girly hands. It doesn't look good, but he can hold his gun, and I don't know why you'd need it with these 2 huge cannons on your back, but Brawl. Next up is Blastoff, who creates my least favorite set of limbs out of the entire set. Both arm and leg I really don't like, but leg is my least favorite out of the 2, and it's, I think, slightly too long for everyone else, so he kind of defaulted to an arm. Once again, like everyone else, he can be a right or a left. Leg formation is effectively the shuttle just standing like that, and it doesn't look very good. Like all the others, he has a fairly easy transformation into his vehicle mode. This is probably the best looking alternative mode out of the bunch. I mean, I'm not really sure, like, what it is, but it looks like it could fly, despite the fact that it doesn't have any thrusters. And these colors just work really well for him, so I really don't have a complaint about this alternative mode. And it looks kind of like a spaceship, almost kind of looks like a Star Wars ship. The detail on this one is amazing. The paint apps, the colors chosen, the whole thing, it's just really fantastic looking alt mode. The only real complaint I have is the fact that you can see the halves of the Bruticus hands right there. Transformation is actually one of the better ones on him. In terms of quality, color, and design, this is honestly the best one of the entire group. Not necessarily my favorite, but definitely the best. I feel like if I dropped it from a relatively high height that wouldn't break. It's probably got the best transformation, one of the best looks overall. It manages to do what it's supposed to do pretty well, although the limbs are sacrificed, but the robot and vehicle are better. So he has effectively no kibble, and I just love these enormous shoulder pads. I always do. I don't know why. I know they're impractical, but I don't know. I think they're always cool. Maybe I get it from Evangelion. But he's pretty much the only one that doesn't have huge voids in his forearms, even though he still has voids in his forearms, and they're hollow underneath. He just feels the best out of all of them. Bafflingly, while he doesn't have thrusters in his vehicle mode, he has them on the back of his calves in this mode. The arms are actually pretty tight, and while the shoulder pad does move with them, everything's still pretty stable. He can also hold his guns like anyone else can, but on top of that, he can also arm mount them. Whatever you prefer. Lack of kibble, good robot, good alt mode, good colors, good feel, good figure. Blast off. And here's arm mode for Swindle, who honestly was my favorite, and I was probably going to get regardless of whether or not I got the rest of Bruticus or not. But upon getting him, I realized his quality isn't as great. His transformation's a little fiddly. Not so much that it's complicated, it's just that you have to get everything in the exact right spot for each individual mode perfectly. And with the thin plastic on these things, it's a little scary. This one's a bit of a difficult transformation, and it doesn't hold together very well, but the end result's kind of nice. I guess it's a Cybertronian ATV. Could mount his gun on top just like any of the other vehicle modes, but my real complaint with this thing is this. And while I know that's for the foot, for Bruticus mode, it's quite a sacrifice. Especially when I don't use this as a foot anyway. He's got quite a bit of visible robot pieces here. It's a decent vehicle mode. I was probably going to get it anyway, but I don't know. The quality just... The robot mode looks pretty good, although he lacks his box art's personality with that black, emotionless face. Probably use a couple better paint apps. It's not dead on for his game model, but it still looks pretty good. As a bonus, you can leave the exhaust pipes forward for some sort of wrist-mounted laser blaster Rodimus-esque thing, and that way you don't have to slice open your finger trying to rotate him around on his forearm. Shoulders aren't bad. They actually stay in position pretty well, and he's got pretty good movement. One of my biggest problems with this figure is how high up his knees are. It's not so bad until you go to pose him. Yeah, it makes it look like he's got huge stonking boots, but it's not very good for posability. Swindle's probably my favorite as far as design goes, but Blastoff is a really close second. I was going to get this guy regardless, but I wish the quality had been better. It's a real shame. And finally, Onslaught. Here's his Bruticus form, and there's not really much to it. It's just a torso with some leg parts that doesn't hold together very well. Transformation into vehicle mode is actually pretty painful. I'd film it, but I don't want you guys to see me cry. The creaking sounds this thing makes when transforming is absolutely terrifying. This is the worst quality one of the bunch. It's just got crap joints. It's like they were like, oh, Cup, that's a terrible design. Let's just go ahead and make it worse. It's not even held together very well. It's barely even holding together. You can see Bruticus' crotch right there and his head, and the only thing that's worse than that is the fact that his head is only covered up by his hands. If I literally didn't have to have this one to complete the Bruticus figure, I definitely would have replaced it with one of the others. There were a couple figures where I was like, oh, I could buy two of them and have two of the same limb because I didn't like some of them. But this one, you just don't get that option. He's the main figure. He's the one that holds everyone together, and it's just terrible. The only thing you can do is put this gun on top of here, and I mean, yeah, it kind of covers things up, but it actually kind of looks worse. It's less streamlined. If it weren't part of Bruticus, I would tell you not to buy it. It's just shit. It looks so good in the stock photography, and it's just not. Hasbro made this figure as cheap as they could because they knew that people would have to buy it, because it was the main part of Bruticus. And honestly, I mean, it worked. It was brilliant, but come on, guys. Terrible. This is terrible. Once again, the creaking plastic for this thing's transformation just makes the whole thing unpleasant. And then you get this, the worst robot out of the bunch. It's just crap elbows. Everything feels awful. He's got the hollow bits in his forearms. His shoulders move, but they don't move away from his body. They're just like, there's no real posability. There's this crotch piece back here that doesn't stay into place no matter what you do. It's connected by a shitty hinge. It's going to break off one day. This whole thing is just crap. He's got these nubs everywhere for the transformation, and I know that's like the whole power core combiner thing and whatever. There's very little redeeming about him, and the only thing that is redeeming is the fact that he's one for the Bruticus. I don't even understand. He has to do the least of everyone else. Everyone else is effectively a 5-changer, maybe a 6-changer for a couple of them. But him, he's just a triple changer. He couldn't have done better than this. I mean, yeah, he's got waist swivel, but it's hampered by this crotch piece, and Bruticus' head back there, he looks terrible from most angles. I guess he can hold his gun, but why? If I looked like him, I'd just stroll out onto the battlefield and just let them take me down, because good God. Come on, Hasbro. You guys are really screwing us now. This was like a $16 figure, and it's not a $16 figure. If you are completely compelled to get Bruticus, be prepared to customize. I'm glad I have it, and I think it's going to be one of those benchmark figures in the future, but I think it's also going to be one of those ones that people are like, yeah, I had to get it, but ugh. This has been the video review for Fall of Cybertron Bruticus, and thank you for watching.